All right, I want to finish the rest of these because I promised myself I would. All right, let's take a look quickly at number 7. Cat, ice, crank, and glass are all names of the females on the American Gladiators program, or what else? They're all stimulants, and like I mentioned earlier, a lot of you will have, it won't even be a statewide problem, you'll have small regional areas of high-use methamphetamine, and while we're used to, we're accustomed to methamphetamine showing up as a relatively white powder with some degree of clarity, a lot of the new methamphetamine is homemade. There are formulas all over the net. All you need is a pressure cooker, access to a hardware store, a grocery store, and a drugstore, and you can make methamphetamine at home. You can do this with a double broiler, you can do it with a lot of different things, but the homemade meth often looks like this. This, by the way, is a shot of Billings, Montana methamphetamine confiscated from a trailer in a home, so that you have the ability to cook up this cakey yellow cake. Looks like you're going to make a yellow cake here. But in less than an hour you can make this. You're making enough methamphetamine in an hour for 3 or 4 days. If you do it right and do the formula. And people are disappearing for 3 or 4 days once they make it. This is an incredibly powerful drug. Moving into the high school. But in the high school, the kids will often call it glass crank or stove top. See, I mean, here's a stove top right here. So you have the answer for number 7, cat, ice, crank, and glass. They're not all necessarily designer drugs. They are all stimulants. Number 8, the drug responsible for emergency room visits in males. Okay, the number 1 drug, of course, is alcohol. But from the list that I've given you, we would be talking about LSD as the correct answer. When you look at emergency room visits across the country, alcohol is number 1. But on weekends, particularly summer weekends, you know, LSD doesn't show up on Wednesdays in the emergency room. LSD overdoses show up. This is an event-oriented drug. So you have the big tours, or you know, you have Horde, Further, Lollapalooza. You have all those tours in the summer. The other ones, you have all those tours in the summer. We have our greatest amounts of LSD overdoses happening, concert tours during the summer. So many, in fact, that they, over the course of the year, replace almost everything except alcohol. Okay. So you get this, you get a lot of that LSD overdose. And the primary reason for that is kids have no ability to determine how much LSD is in any particular dose. And in fact, it's very difficult for even the people who are making the LSD to discover how much. LSD, remember, is measured in micrograms. That's why very few of your drug testing systems will report out on LSD, because number 1, other drugs are measured in nanograms per milliliter, but here's a drug that you would never take in milligram because it's so incredibly powerful. Think about this. If I were to take a 1/4 teaspoon measure from my kitchen drawer and if I put amoxicillin in it and dump that on the table, 1/4 teaspoon, and dump that, then I would have to divide that by 1,000 pieces, take 10 of them out, compress it into a pill, and that would be your 10 milligram pill of amoxicillin. 1,000 pieces. If I were to take the same thing with LSD powder, I'd have to divide that into 1,000,000 pieces. And from those 1,000,000 pieces, micrograms, I would have to take 50 out and compress them into a tiny, something about 1/3. You look on your pretest, you look at any number, look at the printed period after the number, divide it up, and either 1/2 or into 3/3. You have the effective dose of LSD. So which drug dealers are handing out half the printed period size dose of acid at a concert? Oh wait, let me get my tweezers and my magnifying glass out. You want 2 of these, Willis? Here they are. So instead they dump it in a liquid vat, mix it up, take the paper, can you borrow this for a second? So dip the paper in for 20 seconds, saturate it, hang it up on a cable, send it down the line, do the next one. I've been in rooms where they have 200 sheets of these hanging up and drying, but do you get a 50 mic dispersion equally across each hit? The 20 mics are at the top, the 150s are down here at the bottom. So in some kids, they'll double dip some of them. You know, you can get double dips, triple dips. But some kids will get a 20 mic hit at one concert and say, what's the noise about LSD? It hardly did anything. The next concert, buy 2 hits, $10, $5 a shot. We're talking about cheap, readily, unbelievably accessible amounts of drugs. I, with the Hartford Police one night on tour with them, or was there when they arrested a guy who led them back to his van where he had 80,000 sheets of blotter hits. 80,000 sheets. So we're talking about, he had reams of paper in his van. He followed, it was before Jerry Garcia died, he followed the dead around. He made his living selling thousands of dollars worth of hits, $5 to $10 at a time. But, you know, even they don't know what the bottom hits are. So we have kids who don't know getting these hits and coming in and overdosing on it. Most of them survive it if they get to the hospital. The fatalities with LSD are almost all behavioral. What kills them is their behavior when they're on an overdose of LSD. They get injured, killed, wounded, badly confused by the drug. All right, let's do the last ones and then wrap this up for the quiz. Drugs showing the greatest increase in popularity in the last 2 years. This is middle school, not junior high. You can fix that for me because we're seeing it down to the 5th grade now. While marijuana has risen in the 8th grade and 7th grade substantially, just ahead of it across the country would be inhalants. So just ahead of it would be inhalants. So we're looking at generally. Now remember, it doesn't mean it's the #1 drug in adolescence. It means it's had the greatest rise. Remember, we went from 3 to 5% to 21, 28. Were you seeing that in Baton Rouge, Tommy? Solvents down there? Some? Anybody with middle school kids there? I'll tell you how I know. When I go to a middle school and we're talking about drugs, I say, tell me the names of different names for heroin. They know a couple. I say, what about the different kind of solvents? In 1 minute, they'll tell me 25 products. 25 products from WD-40 to Glade to markers to whiteout, liquid paper to, one kid told me Cutter Clean. Later on I said to the kid, I had no idea what Cutter Clean was. I said, what's Cutter Clean? He said, oh, my dad just bet. You know when they're going to cut the nails on dogs? You know, if you cut them up too far, like they bleed like anything and the dog hates you. You're going to love kids, you know. The dog's running around, leave a little blood spot, but then he wants to bite you? I said, okay. So you've been there, huh? He said, so my dad, they have a solvent. They clean the nails on the dog so they can see under where the quick is and where not to cut. And he's stealing Cutter Clean and taking it back, and he and his friends are soaking it in rags and putting it in a little paper bag and huffing away on Cutter Clean. You know? So, because it's a solvent. Any solvent will do it. They'll tell you 20 solvents in 1 minute. 1 minute. Now, they can name a lot of kinds of marijuana, too, but I've never seen. No other drug seems to have the familiarity it has down in the middle school. So it's pretty interesting for them. So, and last but not least, and of course, what do we know about that? One critical aspect of the solvents that I think is important for everybody to know about is that why solvents remain so dangerous is not only are they readily accessible, readily available, easy to get. In fact, it was out here in the Great West, western part of the United States, in 1966 that 4 kids in Denver got high on model cement, breathing out of plastic bags, and one of them didn't die, but one of them had a respiratory collapse because he fell unconscious, and some brain damage from both the solvents and the lack of oxygen. And the national press picked it up, as they often do, and helped the rest of the country in that unique drug education only we can do, you know, where they said, hey kids, you know, don't do this. Don't go down to that model store and buy some of that tester cement and bring it home and get 3 of your friends to come over to your bedroom, you know, after dinner. Don't do that, and then don't take it out and put some of it in a plastic bag and then hold your head right up there and breathe it in, because you will get really high, just like those kids in Denver did. But, you know, you could pull your head in there and die from that. And then immediately the next week reported that this trend was sweeping through the nation. Yeah, when did that start? You know, right after last week's article. So what happened with that, all of that stuff is that through all kinds of legislative bumbling, I know it's hard for you to imagine our legislators bumbling, but when you take a look at, first they were going to ban model cement, then they were going to make model cement $5 a tube, then actually the lobbyists for the model manufacturers of America wanted a law that said you can't buy a tube of cement unless you buy a model. Yeah, that'll solve the problem. So fortunately they didn't do any of that. What they did though was force the manufacturers of model cement to include in the cement an emetic. So oil of mustard is included in model cement. Breathing the oil of mustard in with the vapors causes vomiting. But there's no oil of mustard in construction glue, rubber cement, liquid nails, cutter clean, liquid paper, a white out, spray paint, nail polish remover, lacquer thinner, or 150 other products kids can get access to. Now what's the big risk besides that? Here's the big risk besides that. The big risk is this. Besides the solvents, the big risk is adrenaline. If a kid happens to have an adrenaline production, does he get in a fight with another kid? Is he afraid of something? Does an authority figure like one of us, the local police, a parent, catch that kid and 3 other kids breathing in butane from the lighters that they have? Breathing that butane in, the big risk is that an adrenaline surge will often create a fatality called sudden sniffing death, in which adrenaline and solvents impact so strongly on cardiac function that first there will be cardiac fibrillation and then cardiac failure, and that can happen in under 7 minutes. So that here's, I mean, and CDC says over 800 kids a year have this happen. So you're looking at a high-risk activity, and we have no ability right now to determine which kid is at more risk. We don't see any genetic underlying here. We don't see anything that tells us that we could say, oh, okay, you better not do solvents because you could have sudden sniffing death, but it's okay for you. You have no idea why this is happening, why some kids are susceptible to this and other kids are not. But we do know that there's a ton of this out in the middle school and a lot of chance for this to happen. So solvents remain a big problem. Anybody know what GHB is? GHB, let me mention it quickly. GHB, because we won't be coming back to most of this stuff. We'll be talking about things similar. GHB is gamma hydroxy butyrate. It's one of the so-called date rape drugs. Now, date rape is a terrible term because these are not dates. These are strangers who are watching young women either. They like to target high school senior girls or college freshmen, young women college freshmen, because they don't know the system, they're at a party they shouldn't be at, all that kind of stuff. But they're certainly not dates, and GHB is a clear, colorless, odorless liquid that, like roofies, can be dropped in somebody's drink. But I think GHB is actually more dangerous than roofies. With roofies, you have to take 3 or 4 pills and grind them up, so you might actually be caught. With roofies, the manufacturer, Roche Labs, has also added a bluing agent. If roofies are now mixed in with an alcohol beverage, it turns blue and some actually foam up, which is a good safeguard. But you can drop them in Diet Coke and they don't blue and form. I mean, I've been in college bars where blue foam could be coming out of that bottle. They don't care anyway. And so I work with college kids. I love working with college kids, but it's so interesting to hear them say stuff like, yeah, if anybody put 3 or 4 pills in my drink, I'd know all about it. I've been in college bars. Somebody could put 3 or 4 ground up chipmunks in your drink. Who's been in a college bar where they've seen somebody tip back 2 cigarette butts out of the beer bottle? See, all you gotta do is see that once. And it's not about like high sensitivity to tactile response. So I like the blue foam. I like the bluing, but they might not see it if it's in a dark beer bottle. They might not see it if it's in a can of Coke. It won't blue if it's in Coca-Cola or any soft drink. GHB is probably more dangerous in the extent that no color, no odor, no taste. A little liquid in a vial costs 10 to 20 bucks. Kids will pour it right in, and a huge risk here. At least with Rohypnol, at least with roofies, you have a legitimately manufactured drug. We know what the dose is. What GHB, the dose for in potency, it's unbelievable. We've had fatalities here, because some young male who's doing this is not worried about somebody's, what's the history of kidney function, liver function, or cardiac function in this young woman? What's her weight? What's her metabolic rate? None of that is a consideration. Can I make a victim out of this girl or not? And if that drug is dropped in there, we've had fatalities because although, like roofies, GHB disconnects the brainstem from the limbic system and cortex. It makes somebody a walking around, cognitively unconscious victim. They can't remember, can't make decisions, don't have response to their emotions, can't be afraid of people, but can still walk around. But GHB has a more critical dose point in which it can override brainstem function. You can have a fatality. You have a central nervous system depressant fatality activity here. So GHBs are a real problem. Last but not least, on our most popular over-the-counter drug abused by teenagers, mostly young teenagers, what do you think that is? Okay, when we look at the drug that's often abused by over-the-counter, you look right at dextromethorphan, which is B. Dextromethorphan is part of Robitussin or any of the other drugs that have cough suppressant activity. If they have cough suppressant activity, you're looking at a drug that can cause a high. DM in liquid form, or now, by the way, anybody seen this on the internet? You can buy dextromethorphan through the internet. Oh, but wait, there's a safeguard. I'm sorry. You can't sell more than 30 milligram doses of it. So they're selling 90 milligram doses, but printing on it, you must divide this into 3 doses. Because that's going to be really safe. So what's happening? We're seeing kids buy them over the net in capsule form. We're seeing kids get it at the drugstore. And robo-shots in combination with alcohol can cause significant intoxication. So that's the story on the pretest. We're going to go to lunch at 12, but I'd like to get you through the models so we're ready for our kind of brain chemistry stuff. Before we do that, let's take a look. Now please, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give each one of these models 1 minute of attention, just because we want to set the stage for the new research. All of these models these are models people have developed over the years in which we've said, why do people do drugs? So one is a medical model. They have something wrong underlying their neurochemistry, their brain function, and that's why they do drugs. We have the disease concept that says, no, it's not going to be fixed by a medication. So I'm going to outline these, and please, do not see this as disrespect for your model. I'm going to give each one 2 minutes. You may have studied this for your lifetime, and I'm doing your practice based on this, and I will make, of course, in those 2 minutes, a number of disparaging remarks about your model. Don't take it personally. All these models are relevant and effective models to use, but the struggle we've always had is that none of them answers the questions for all our clients. And what we've often done in treatment is say, well, I need to hammer you around until you fit my model. As opposed to, well, maybe you came into this through a different mechanism. So we're going to do a quick review on this because I want to get to a model that's, I think, pretty helpful, scary but pretty helpful. Medical model is basically what I talked about. Some kind of look at the biomechanics in which there's some kind of defect or deficiency in the brain or the brain chemistry, and very often we can fix that. The perception is going into a surgical technique, as they did, by the way, in Lima, Peru, where they were doing bilateral cingulectomies, where they were going in to crack cocaine, well, that was paste, coca paste, bazooka abusers, and surgically destroying a part of the brain that was responding to the pleasurable effects of bazooka. These people need more pleasure than other people. We'll go in and take care of that. And they, of course, discovered that they wiped out all responses to any pleasurable experiences. We can fix it surgically, or we can fix it with prescriptions. And those prescriptions may be to replace. So people who need heroin, we're going to replace that with methadone. People who need cocaine, we're going to replace that with Ritalin. We have, in fact, a protocol at Yale Psychiatric where they're doing testing on Ritalin as a replacement drug. We're going to do blockers. We're going to say, okay, you like heroin, we're going to make you take Trexan, and Trexan is going to block the effects of heroin. So we're going to find some drug to fix the reward or something else. Now, does that work for everybody? Does everybody come into drug abuse because they have a serious underlying biochemical defect? Absolutely not. And that's what the disease concept said. You know, they said it's bigger. It's not just the person. The person is one part. They're the host. It's the agent. That the drug plays a powerful role here in the environment. And that has been a powerful, powerful model that's been exceptionally helpful for millions of people. 12-step programs often are the support for this because part of the host difficulties, the disease concept believes, is that there's been a lack of purpose or meaning in life, and not only is the disease physical, but also spiritual in its dimension. This is a wonderful model that has helped millions of people. Has it been effective for everybody? Of course not. No model is. Of course not. Some people struggle more with this because they have unable, either based on developmental causes. For a 13-year-old kid, it's hard for them to internalize the message that you have a disease, you have the disease forever, you have to be in recovery your whole life, you'll never be able to use a drug or alcohol again your whole life. And they're like, what is wrong with you? Number one. Number two, for many kids, higher power is an abstraction that they can't get at 13 or 14. Who's a higher power? No. Kurt Cobain, yeah, he's dead, he's into drugs, he's a musician. Okay, that's a higher power. And for other kids, when we talk about I'm powerless over the drug alcohol, their perception of life is that the only time they have any power is when they use the drug alcohol or marijuana. So we say to them, you're powerless over the drug. And they say, no, no, no. I'm powerless over the rest of the bullshit that's in my life. But when I use the drug, I get control over that. So they are unable developmentally to incorporate this easily. Now we can modify it and change it and do the steps differently, and that can work. But to think that it will work out of the box because it's an adult model is inappropriate. For other people who are going to struggle with this, women who are using drugs as a treatment for the powerful physical and emotional trauma they've received in a battering relationship, are often not ready for a disease concept model. Because if you think about the steps, I'll turn myself, I came to believe I had to turn myself over to a higher power. For 10 years, they've been beaten every night. You think they didn't ask a higher power for help? And their belief system is, yeah, well, see, it didn't work for 10 years. I was getting beaten, it's not working now. You know, in a room that's dominated with men, I'm going to get up and say I'm powerless? I don't think so. A fearless searching inventory, see, someone was doing one for me every night. You know, didn't cook things right, didn't do this right, and blaming me for the beating that I was getting. So maybe later, but not initially. So it's a great model for millions of people, but not for everyone. Medication for feelings. Psychiatrist Ed Consian out of Harvard said, you know what? Just like we talked about earlier, we can find now that specific drugs go to specific receptor sites in the brain, and those specific receptor sites will often be directly related to a specific emotion. Isn't that unbelievable? That a drug can get in and turn down a single emotion, or turn it up. And Ed Consian, at his research at Harvard, said, boy, you find out that they use the drug to take care of something that's an underlying need. Now, I like this model when I was doing treatment because it made sense to me with the kids I was working with. What's the problem with this model? Does every kid have a specific underlying emotional problem for which they're medicated? No. What happens in our treatment? With me, I would say, well, so what drugs are you using? We'd get that through an assessment, and I would say, okay, alcohol and marijuana, that's anxiety and boredom. I like that, and I'd say to the kids, okay, tell me about what your anxieties are. I said, well, I don't have any. You know. Or I'd say, tell me about your dysfunctional family system. And they'd say, actually, my parents are pretty cool. I'd say, well, that's denial. See? So you have a dysfunctional parent somewhere, or a grandparent, or an uncle, maybe a secret. No. Now, in millions of cases, that's true. Is it the case in that's social learning model, family systems? With the medication for feeling, I'd be saying, I know you have anxieties about something. Say I don't. I'd say you're resistant to treatment. It worked out all right because if I had them in treatment for 2 or 3 months, I could create anxiety and usually depression too, so that we could know why they're taking drugs. That was a great model. Did it work for everybody? No. Neither did the social learning model. Again, another powerful model that says what your family and community and peers do, you will do also. If your family solves its problems by taking drugs, so will you. If they make your life miserable, and of course many of these team up. If your life in a dysfunctional family creates a bunch of negative emotions, you'll not only get the modeling from the family, but the need to use the drugs. Great models, all helpful, all powerful, but still, for many of us, the struggle was with the kids who said things like this. When we said, why do you like doing drugs? And they said, I love getting high. And that, for many of us, was the greatest struggle, because what we want to hear about is some underlying emotion that we can help them address. And what a lot of kids are saying to us is, there isn't any. And we say, no, yes, there is. And they're saying, no. So now the new research says, you know what? There may be underlying emotions, there may be problems, there may be social dilemmas, there may be a disease. All that is true, but we want to add a model on here based on understandings of neurochemistry of the brain, and that model is called the Bliss model. And the fundamental understanding of the Bliss model says this, that drugs, almost all drugs, if you want to, you can take a look at that brain again and write on it. I'm going to show you a couple of overheads that aren't in your package, but are just to illustrate this point. The Bliss model says this. What we know about the most powerful addictive drugs is that they have, even the drugs that have fundamental chemical differences in their structure, mechanism of action, and site of action. Drugs that don't look like anything at all like each other in the brain and the places they go and what they do. Not even remotely similar to what the new research says is it doesn't matter so much about that, because sooner or later, indirectly or directly, through second messengers or primary receptor sites, all of the addictive drugs get into this powerful point in the brain we call the limbic system, and in that limbic system impact on 3 or 4 subsets of receptor sites we call reward sites. And that those sites are in this brain, and that they are scattered about. One is called the basal forebrain. I'll write this stuff out. It doesn't matter if you're obsessive compulsive, write all these things down. If not, you don't have to. And the basal forebrain here, in the brain is 3 or 4 sites. And another part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is down here. In the limbic system. I'll write that out. Nucleus accumbens. That's another place that organizes behavior related to emotions. So drug-taking behavior related to emotions is printed with exceptional memory in the brain. And another place in the brain called the amygdala that I already mentioned. Not only do we have the negative emotion, anxiety, but a set of positive emotions generated at the amygdala also. And a place in the brain called the ventral, over here, the ventral tegmentum. Now, all these things, all these places I'm talking about have reward sites, actual physical places in the brain, and those physical places in the brain we know are waiting there for neurochemical activity. And the thing that runs the neurochemical activity is a wonderful compound called dopamine. So dopamine is a compound all of us have in the brain. If we don't have it, things don't happen. We have dopamine in the cortex. It helps us, for example, in our perception of reality. And you're going to have the right dopamine. In America, we always want more, but more is not always good. But my dopamine levels are too low. And I come in and Jason says to me, who's doing the video work today, oh, nice tie, Mike. If I don't respond to that because I don't perceive it as an interaction, my dopamine levels are too low. my dopamine levels are just right, I say, oh, thank you, Jason. I picked this one out myself. Actually, I didn't. The judge helped me this morning because I'm colorblind and I need advice. But I would lie anyway. If my dopamine levels are too high, I will perceive that as perhaps a critical or aggressive comment. Nice tie, Mike. Oh, Jason, your tie's better than this? See that? I'm going to see a tie on you today. Hey, Jason, you want a piece of me? Come on over here. So that my perception of what's going on between Jason and myself is distorted by a high level of dopamine. That's why all the antipsychotics, of course, lower the level of dopamine in the cortex. So what's going to happen? Dopamine in those places is helpful. Dopamine in the brainstem is helpful. If we don't have dopamine in the brainstem, you and I do not get to function in terms of what we're doing right now, taking notes. So Michael's over here taking notes, people out here taking notes. If I don't have dopamine, I don't have fine motor control. Research on this goes back to the 50s. Where the understanding for Parkinson's disorder came from the recognition that dopamine at specific receptor sites up in the motor cortex in the brain and down through the brainstem and directing neural activity through that body helped us do fine motor control work. So I was in with Susan and Naomi yesterday getting acupuncture. I was so happy they had normal dopamine in the brainstem when they were putting those acupuncture needles in my ear. And if you don't have it, if you have hand tremor, you can't do that stuff. Now, in the 50s, researchers thought, well, hey, all we have to do is give everybody dopamine who's suffering from Parkinson's, and discovered that dopamine given externally into the bloodstream through the stomach in a pill is too big to get into the brain. It doesn't work. Oh, they did discover that dopamine in the physical body has an effect on sexuality. So people have remarkable increases in libido, but no improvement in getting buttons or zippers undone. So we had a highly frustrated set of experimental subjects. My own fantasy is that a bunch of them got together and invented Velcro based on the research in the brain. Well, we have no proof of that. But down here in that limbic system, and those wonderful 13 reward sites that make life worth living, and those sites are things like, oh, just powerful things. I mean, normal things as the food sites. Apparently shopping is one of those sites. I'm riding in with a group who is coming in on Tuesday and Wednesday. We're coming in from the airport, and on the way through, I'm saying, because it's in men too, I'm saying, look at that sporting shop, look at this. And all the women in the van say, the Bon. Oh, they have the Bon here in Missoula. So some reward sites are being activated. Food, fluids, sex, shelter, all the Maslow's lower hierarchical needs, but now we know scattered through those other places in the basal forebrain and the nucleus accumbens are things like relationship reward sites, parts of the brain that only light up when one of our significant others makes contact with us. Nobody else can light those places up. Okay. Artistic accomplishments, a beautiful sunset. You say, I love your town. Any town that has 5 pawn shops is a town I like. 5 pawn shops and 3 or 4 secondhand stores. So I was in playing guitars at all the things. I love to play guitar. I don't want to take my guitar with me on the road. But there's always a pawn shop in most towns for me to go in and play. And that makes me feel better. Not just because the music is good, but the actual activity. The physical and artistic activity all has profound reward generation for us. Foods. Why do people do crossword puzzles? Because they're addicted? No, because they get a reward from them, a powerful reward. So we have 13 wonderful things, but we have to work for those things. Now, the scariest part about the drugs we know about today is that they interfere with normal dopamine action. In normal ways, dopamine is going to be released. Go to one of these receptor sites. We will get a sense of reward. Then, some of that dopamine will go back and get picked back up, that's right here, and some of the dopamine that's left over will get metabolized by an enzyme, MAO. Has to work like that. The brain doesn't know there's only 9 receptors over there. It sends out 29 pieces. 9 of them activate the sites, we get the reward. Of the 20 left, 10 are sent back up, so the brain doesn't have to keep making so much dopamine. The rest are metabolized, and even the ones that get in receptor sites will be metabolized out by MAO, the enzyme. And now, see, I love this, we draw these diagrams, it would be nice if our brain looked like this. What your brain looks like is if somebody came in here last night and strung about 4,000 piano wires across the floor here and stood outside and threw yogurt of different colors in here. That's what your brain looks like. And when we talk about these events, these neurochemical events, they might be happening 1,000 times a second at some of these sites. It's unbelievably complex and unbelievably interactive and interrelated. But it does happen with such incredible efficiency that if you and I do something rewarding, we feel the emotional impact of that reward. 13 places. Now, it's hard to light them all up. You can. You have to have much higher organizational skills than I have. Because you get artistic, intellectual, physical, you'd have to, even there's a novelty neuron. Some parts of the brain light up only the first time we do something new. Which, of course, is why drug users will say, oh, the first time. First, they have no tolerance to the drug, and the part of the brain that doesn't generally light up the second time fires off the first time and gives it that sense of things. Anything. I went, why I did this, I don't know, but I went to a police conference to speak in Reno, no, in Las Vegas. Hey, let's have a police conference somewhere where prostitution, gambling, well, you have to drive for the prostitution, where gambling and liquor is always available, and will be police. But so I went to speak there, and I went with a bunch of cops who had consumed way too much of the free liquor to a water sports place that they had kept open only for our conference. And watching policemen who were way overweight and out of shape and been on the force long enough to ride in the cruiser and sit behind the desk, go up 7 flights of stairs and stand in the Bombay water slide thing, which hydraulically takes them out over an almost vertical drop and opens the Bombay doors. Well, and then they drop 80 feet down and slide into a pool. And you can watch the effects of alcohol on judgment and good sense and things like that. But the first time any of us did it was the most exciting time. Now, then on, your brain doesn't respond the same anymore. So you have this wonderful brain, but boy, we have to work hard at it. Skydiving, perhaps from 13,000 feet, with a significant other of your choice, engaged in various activities on the way down, landing on the beach, perhaps with friends and family who have prepared the gourmet meal for you, with the wine, at sunset. Perhaps you've composed a poem you can read to the group as part of the artistic stuff. Yeah. I don't get that many chances to do that. Although Judge Larson promised me that we could try that up here in the zoo. So what happens? You and I have to do all this work to get a dopamine reward. The scary part is that every drug gets a shot at the dopamine system. And some drugs, like crack cocaine, light up every reward site 4 to 6 seconds after somebody takes a hit off the crack pipe. See, so I have to go out and buy a CD to get a musical reward. I have to have a friend. I have to have a spouse or a child, a good relationship with my mom for the other relationships. I have to do work. I have to be work on my any artistic, intellectual activities. I have to get the food I need. I have to work for everything that I get that's rewarding. But of course, that's why this exists. It's self-preservative and species preservative. If we didn't do all these things, we wouldn't exist. And in fact, an overuse of any of those sites shuts them down. Anybody in here knows that you, for example, if you tried one of the chocolates, and I went down to the carousel, the judge told me about the carousel, I went down to see it, and in the gift shop they sell those awful chocolates that, that are unbelievably good. So I bought a bunch for other people. And apparently someone came into my room last night and ate a number of them. But if you ever started working your way through really good chocolate, at some point in time, it's not an appetite set point, it's a reward set point. At some point in time, your brain says, oh, wait, see, the texture isn't so good anymore. It doesn't feel the same. And then you're looking for the raspberry ones because the taste has diminished, You want the ones with the biggest flavor impact. And then the smell starts to be like, whoa, way too much. Your brain says, you had enough of these, and you don't need any more. So, people who get involved with those 48-hour sexual marathons. Well, Judge, what were you telling me about that? Judge Larson said, the last 8 hours were hell. Neither Judge Larson or I have any experience in life and those, but we know from people who do that it's not rewarding. not only is it not rewarding, it's often physically painful. It's a disordered, compulsive behavior, but not a rewarding one. That the brain can't stand repeated reward, and in fact, after a time will shut down. Shut these receptors right down. So what happens to people who take drugs? The drugs give them extraordinary reward, followed by diminished response. When you get people who come into treatment, then they come into treatment and say, you know, the reason I'm thinking of giving up the drug is that I believe a phenomenon called tachyphylaxis is happening, where at actual cell sites deep in the limbic sources of my brain that reward specific receptors, there's no longer a response because there's been a deterioration in the actual receptor site based on repeated dopamine bombardment. And so I know that to pursue the course of taking more and more drugs will only cause more damage and a need to take more and more drugs until I'm out of control. That's why I'm here. Do they? In fact, what is their perception? How do they fix this? More drugs, higher dose, more often. And what happens, of course, is you shut the brain down further until the point that you can actually shut this brain off to the point that, here's a hard one for those of us with adult drug court and adolescent drug court to the same extent, although they have way more activity going on in the brain, and I'll talk about that more after lunch. Here's a hard thing for us. If somebody gets to the point where they shut off every reward mechanism in the brain by repeated use of any drug, some have higher impact than others and faster. Methamphetamine, crack cocaine do this at a much faster rate than the other drugs do, and more across the board. All drugs will do it. But if you shut the brain's ability to perceive reward down and you get people into treatment, one of the fundamental things we're telling them is that as you go through the program, you will begin to feel better about yourself, your relationships, your life. And the honest ones, after a number of months, will say to you, hey, tell me, see, do you straight people feel, like your life sucks as bad as mine does, every day? You say, no, you're going to all your meetings, you're doing great in group, you're making a lot of progress, things have to be better. And they say, yeah, talk the talk, walk the walk. And eventually, in fact, it will happen. But it might be months down the line, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months down the line before this brain restructures, and it will. Well, yeah, all the new research says the brain, in fact, the old research that said brain cells can't regenerate, they can. We have new brain cells that can grow in remarkable ways, and these, particularly since at reward sites, those are protein structures, they will, in fact, regenerate, but not tomorrow, and not the next day. Now, it's so interesting to me that in treatment we generally cut back on the amount of visits and frequency of visits at 6 months time frames. When we look at the relapse rates and match up what we know about the brain, here's what we're seeing. The first 30 days, mostly because of withdrawal, resistance treatment, all kinds of pressures, at the highest relapse rate. The next peak is at 6 months when people are feeling physically better, more in control, better health, a sense of accomplishment, but no reward. They're back to physical function sexually, but no emotional reward. Yeah, was it good for you? Yep. Yeah, is the game on tonight? Okay. No emotional reward. The kids get A's because they want dad to be happy. Great. Now, someone cooks a gourmet meal for a 60-day anniversary, 90-day anniversary, it's just food. So, how hard is it for this brain to perceive a future in which my brain is back in normal functioning? And it will. But that's why we know short-term treatment has had such a tremendously poor rate of success, because we need to keep people in treatment till they get past this, start the healing process, stay in recovery, see the shift in themselves and their cohort group, and start to get an ability to experience some level of reward, satisfaction, gratification in life that the drug gave them at levels that were beyond their ability to manage, and then took away from them completely. See? It's unbelievably powerful how much change happens in that brain, and how scary it is. And when we talk more after lunch, because I'm going to send you to lunch, particularly when we talk tomorrow, we're going to talk about how long the memory of that high persists embedded in the neurochemical substrates of this brain. So we're talking about a fundamental change in the brain that drugs bring about by direct action, and each drug has a different mechanism. I don't need to go over them. Cocaine does it by flooding out dopamine and suppressing reuptake. Methamphetamine does it by flooding out and overriding the enzyme ability to keep up with it. Nicotine does it by suppressing the enzyme activity. So you get dopamine and then no enzyme to break it down for 20 minutes. Every drug does it differently, but the outcome of all drugs that are powerfully addictive is they get in and change the fundamental rewards that make life worth living in a way that's terribly destructive. Did anybody remember in the 60s with all the new drug laws that came in with the 60s, a bunch of people, Joseph Alpert, a bunch of others, tried to get the federal government to go along to believe that smoking banana skins was hallucinogenic, so that the federal government would ban the importation of bananas. And in fact, Donovan had a song, Mellow Yellow, and all that stuff. And of course, the government's not that dumb. But the reason we don't smoke banana skins is that we don't have Chiquita hallucinations when we do that based on the ban of bananas. It doesn't work. If a drug doesn't work, people give up on it. And they give up on it pretty quickly. So those of you, I don't know if you're seeing it here yet in Montana, but back east we're seeing the appearance of cigarettes that are non-cigarette, non-tobacco. Non-tobacco cigarettes that are the same format, the same size, in a pack, that have all different herbal compounds in them. But almost all of them are nowhere near as effective as nicotine. So they appear, you'll see them in the convenience stores for about 3 months. And then they disappear. And the reason they disappear is people buy 1 pack or 2 packs and then don't buy them anymore, because if a drug doesn't work, then people stop using it. And what nicotine does, beyond getting into the brainstem and impacting significantly on metabolic rate and appetite suppression, what nicotine also does in any format. It can be Nicorette, the gum, the new nasal spray. Anybody seen that? I have a new nasal spray for the Nicorette. You have an inhaler, a nasal spray, a patch, and a pill. Now, can we do better? I doubt it, but if you look over here at nicotine, what you'll see is that what nicotine does is stimulates the release of dopamine, but then more importantly, the compounds in nicotine block the release of the enzyme monoamine oxidase. So there's some dopamine released, which is normal and with most drugs, and then a suppression of the normal enzyme for about 20 minutes that would block the dopamine, that would eradicate dopamine from receptor sites. So if I have a positive, emotionally rewarding interaction, I have dopamine, and then it's gone. You know, it's a beautiful sunset. I watch it. I like it to last forever. It doesn't. Okay. I flew home from somewhere out west one night, and I was landing in Albany, New York, and the pilot said, "Boy, those of you on the left side of the plane are going to get a real treat. Look out the window. The northern lights were out." And he said, "Don't worry, I'll fly. I'll turn so you have to," because we were all afraid people on the right side would run over. Could happen. So it was so beautiful that when the plane landed, a bunch of us, the airport is close to the Mohawk River where there's a bike path and a parking place. So I didn't say a word to anybody. I went out, got my car, drove over to the parking lot, away from the lights at the airport, got out by the river, and looked at the northern lights. 35 cars came in. Now, what do all those people do? Don't they have homes to go to? Don't they have kids waiting for them, just like I have? But the beautiful vista is not just physically rewarding. We know there's dopamine releases in the brain for something like that. It's emotionally rewarding. Music. We know music from the studies that Avram Goldstein has done out at Stanford. Music has not only an activation of the auditory cortex and the brainstem, yeah, I can dance to that, but it also has activation of dopamine activity in reward sites. Music doesn't just sound good, it feels good. So that we have, now of course, Goldstein's work is so intriguing because it demonstrates that dopamine receptor sites in activity based on auditory cortical mechanisms like music are not the same in everybody. So I can play a musical piece here, and some of you will say, "Well, it's wonderful," and some of you will be wondering when I'm going to get the good music on. And of course, if you're a kid with twice as much dopamine activity and auditory cortical sites, what will be of greater value in terms of emotional intensity and reward in your life than in your parents? Well, that'll be music. And those of you who have kids are often either saying out loud or saying to yourself, why do they like Alice in Chains, who's not a person but a group? And you know, why do they like that? Why do they like that? Because you're not having the same neurochemical event when you listen to it. So you have this whole set of differences in the brain, and one difference in the adolescent brain is that what nicotine will do is get in, release dopamine, and suppress the enzyme that breaks it down for 20, 30 minutes. So just like the Northern Lights kept me happy for an hour on the way home, I'd like to keep me happy forever. See, it can't, because the chemistry gets depleted. It has to. It has to get metabolized, depleted. We have to have this ongoing action, or else you see the Northern Lights once, you know, that's it. You know, I don't need to do that again. You know, I had sex. You know, that was good. You know. But what our brains need is repeated reward and striving and mechanisms by which we keep each other in the species, the human species, alive. So you have this wonderful brain, and you have the outside drugs. That's the scary part. So nicotine for 20, 25 minutes gets in and suppresses appetite, increases metabolic rate, and makes me have a sense of euphoria and reward. Not at a high level, but at an interesting level. And it does it through a mechanism in the brain. That's why when I talk about values and philosophies and all that stuff as part of this field, there's no escaping it. In my state in New York, we had a big meeting once where I provided training to all the top division heads in our state, and we were trying to get the division of alcohol, which was separate and apart from drug abuse at that time. We were trying to get them to come to allow our methadone maintenance treatment clients, 40% of whom were dying from alcoholism. In our methadone maintenance clinics, we had people die from kidney failure and liver failure, but of 100 people who died, 40 died directly as related to alcohol abuse or alcoholism. We were trying to get the Office of Alcoholism, the Division of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse, to allow our methadone maintenance clients to come in to their treatment centers who were 3 blocks away from the methadone maintenance place and get treatment. They said no. Those people cannot come in for treatment. Why not? They're not off drugs. Well, no, they're alcoholic. Well, what else are they? They're methadone maintenance patients. That we will not treat people who are taking a psychoactive drug. And even this research was available. And I would say, oh, okay, let's look at the drug that suffuses every alcohol treatment center I've ever been in, which is nicotine, that has activity in psychoactive parts of the brain and is clearly an emotionally, and they basically said, yeah, but it's an emotionally impacting drug that we like. So, you know, are there values in this field? You bet. Does nicotine have an impact on emotions? Absolutely. Does it have the same mechanism of dependency that every other drug has? Of course it does. Is it one we like better, though? Sure. Is it legal? Absolutely. Is methadone legal? Of course it is. But see, it's not about. So, like I said, a lot of the stuff is not about psychopharmacology. It's about what do I believe. And you have there's a critical difference, and one that I find acceptable, but I have to struggle with it. And when we have a 12-step, the disease model says we have to have an abstinence recovery-based model, and we will not treat people who are not in abstinence. And their perception is that methadone is a dependency-producing drug that they're taking. Well, but so is nicotine. So you get down to that kind of stuff. But we solved it. We opened alcoholism treatment centers inside the methadone maintenance clinics. And we got our drug dependency staff trained and became CACs. It took us 2 years to do it. We did it. And we reduced the rate of fatalities from alcohol from 40% to 28%. So see, there's ways you can do it. But it's not always about what's in the brain, what's the drug doing in the brain. It's about what's my belief system doing in the brain. So we have a pretty interesting field, but we're finding out how all of those drugs that last, that persist, that have high potential for addiction, get into this brain and change fundamental reward activities. And if they didn't do it, people wouldn't take them. Hey, when I used to work in New York City and still do research there, you can buy almost any drug when you get off the subway at any stop. But the drugs that don't get into these places in the brain have, I'm not getting offered amoxicillin when I get off the 34th. Nobody's saying, hey, I got some great, it's Colombian amoxicillin, Smoke this, you'll never have strep throat again. Nobody's selling it to me because it's not getting into the emotional part of the brain, and in the cortical, the perceptual part of the brain, and changing it with the intensity that people want or need to have that change. So it's powerful stuff what happens in the brain. And nicotine is one of the powerful ones. We'll talk about those other things, tolerance and increased dose and frequency in a couple of minutes. Somebody else had a question or a comment. I saw a hand I thought earlier. Anybody else?
Too far off. What do you think of the Switzerland clinics that are managing all the different kinds of drugs of abuse, supposedly in a prescribed, predictable way?
I don't know yet. I want to see later on. There's 2 or 3 supposedly new things about managing all addiction, all recovery at one time. I want to see more data. There's anybody seen the ads for the 4-hour detox? There's ads. Go to California, drive down the highways. Drive down the highways of California, you see big billboards that say overnight detox, afternoon detox, where if you're a heroin addict, you can go in there. They suppress you with barbiturates to basically unconsciousness, and then introduce Trexan, the blocker for the opioids, and you go in on Friday night, Saturday night, you go home a new man, a heroin-free person. Now, does that detox mean that you won't go back to heroin? No. So I want to see what happens, get longer stuff. We'll see. If you look at the British model, anybody looked at the British model? The British models will take heroin. They take cigarettes and soak them in heroin and give them to heroin addicts as part of a prescription. So, we had a big investigation. I went to England to look at that model. And people are saying, see, why don't we do that? Because it works. You just get a prescription, you go in, you get the heroin. We don't have any of that stuff. We don't have people selling it. We don't have people, of course you do. You spend a week in England outside the drugstores that supply the scripts. And you watch them come out and sell off half the pack. Sell off right then to other people. You watch the people do what we do in this country, which is get my social security number. And develop another ID. And now they have scripts at three different drugstores under 3 different complete identities for their heroin addiction. So they're selling 2 scripts and keeping 1. It's all of this stuff. The flaw is not often the concept, but the human interaction that runs it and is involved in it. So we'll see. I want to see. Somebody else, quick comment about this morning, the brain, the chemistry. Let's go on. Let's take a look. We're going to run through these pages, but I'd go right to page 4. The other stuff is all stuff that you know about. You can read it, biopsychosocial. It's stuff about, those kind of different issues. I'd like you to go to page 4 just quickly because we already had that brain to look at. We already know that the action takes place at receptors, just like we have here on this page. So we have those receptors and we have the axon. We know the receptor sites are going to be here. Those compounds called neurotransmitters in our own brain. What we're learning is most drugs somehow impact on our own set of chemicals that all of us have, and that more and more as we learn about drugs, we're learning that virtually every drug does its work by somehow impacting on it, might mimic one of our own chemicals at a receptor site. It might increase the activity of neurochemicals and fire more of them out. It might decrease it. It might suppress or activate enzymes. And it might block. So we have all these things that outside drugs might do. They might go directly to a receptor site. They may fire out more chemicals. They may block that enzyme. They may do all kinds of things. But all of it seems to happen somehow in the brain at specific receptor sites in very particular locations in the brain. And among those neurotransmitters that we know are important, you have a list right there on that page 4 on the left-hand side. And you can look at them. I talked briefly about dopamine as critical in terms of the chemistry of reward. Serotonin, another powerful chemical. We know that up in the cortex, serotonin helps us in the cortex with the 5 senses, sensory information. That's why drugs like LSD, which boost the level of serotonin substantially, can create such powerful distortions about reality. So that they might be wonderful and exciting. Hey, I went to Dave Matthews' concert a while ago. They have 5 trip screens. You know, when you go to a big concert, there's 40,000 people or so. They used to have the big one screen over the stage, and if you were in the really cheap seats or on the lawn, on the lawn so far away, you thought you were at another event. If you were there, they put the big screen up and they filmed the performers so that you could see them, because if you're looking at this big, but on the screen you can see them. Now a lot of the concerts have trip screens. They have 4 or 5 screens set up, and what is happening is not at all related to what's going on stage. They're all different visual images, and they're called trip screens for the people who are at the concert wanting a visual context to have a hallucinogenic experience. So they're not watching the performers at all. They're into the music, they're watching the visual images, they're picking up the crowd energy, and they're having a distortion of sensory information that may seem wonderfully exciting. And I've been at a concert where kids see, oh, I see the notes, from Fish, from Trey Anastasio's guitar. See, the rest of us, we can only hear the notes. And now they can see the notes swirling around in colors. I say, anybody, who's been to a concert lately? Anybody? If you go to concerts, you can always find these people. They're the people that most people have moved 8 or 12 feet away from because they're doing after-image dancing or wave dancing. That's because when they move their hands quickly, they see the after-image, but of course, you're going to get hit by that quick movement as they're doing this, and everybody's saying, oh, is this guy here at this concert? Not really, but he's present. So they'll actually see after-images of their hands. That's why they do that kind of stuff, so that they'll move their hand like that and see the after image, then they'll circle back and catch it. It's strange. But what happens when it's too high a level? They might have cross-sensing, so they can see sounds, hear colors, and that might be wonderful and exciting until the sense of touch gets involved. And for reasons we don't understand, human beings, tactile sense is extremely, just extremely prone to negative reference. So that what will often happen is kids will start to feel the notes get on their skin, or insects. I used to go to the Palace theaters across the country, go to concerts. It's pretty great. You only get 6,000 people. It's much more manageable for research and stuff like that. But they all have these big wall-to-wall carpets, and they're all these big cabbage roses. So you want to see a kid with too much LSD, watching the insects come out of those carpet roses on their skin. Tactile sensation seems to be much more difficult for us to manage than visual sensation. Well, I'll give you an example. Can the motor cortex of your brain, the tactile center, override the thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex? Anytime. Who's got kids that went through elementary school? Ever? It's February, 2nd grade. Get the letter home from the school nurse. Okay. It's the letter you hate. It's the letter that says, unfortunately, in Jeremy's little 2nd grade class, we've discovered that many of his classmates have highly contagious case of head lice. And if you're the mom reading that letter, you're already convinced they've run off the letter up your arms. And the school nurse is always so helpful to put in, I think, wonderfully identifying places that you should look at your son Jeremy and the rest of the family because they're so highly contagious. Look at the base of the hairline at the back of the neck and over the ears, and before you're done with that letter, there's a war going on between the motor cortex and the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is saying, there are no lice in this house. We could win the Clean Hair Award in America in this house. And the motor cortex is saying, oh wait, there's one now. They're saying, It's not, it is. And that in an incredibly short period of time, what are you doing? You're doing this, and then you're saying to your spouse, okay, well, let me hold my head at a different angle. And they're like, I know there's some there. They say, there's none there. They say, well, now we're talking about that. Anyone having the urge to, Sarah, this is like, go ahead, feel free. Listen, we're talking about, we have, it's a one-dimensional thing. I'm not even showing you a picture. We're talking about it. Imagine boosting that up by about 100 times. See, and then seeing what happens when serotonin levels get right up. That's why kids on the SSRIs and the LSD or the other hallucinogens have a much greater propensity for highly charged acid trips, which may go bad at any time. How much stimulation is there? Where are they? What's the environment? How old they are? What's their life experience? All that. That's why we have so many of them coming into the emergency room. We know a bunch of other drugs like ecstasy, because it's MDMA, and we know that the methylene dioxymethamphetamine combination gets in and has this powerful influence, because while serotonin in the cortex does our senses, serotonin in the limbic system helps regulate the intensity of mood. We call these drugs like ecstasy and pathogens. They actually, don't think of the pathogenic part, think of the empathy part. They create a sense of trust, bonding, warmth, affection, affiliation. That I belong here. Everybody cares about me. I care about them. All through the mediation of this particular chemical in the brain for 8 to 12 hours. Very powerful change, particularly with a kid who feels isolated, alienated, and disconnected from his family, his school, his community, or when they go away to college. Now, they can't wait to go. I love that. If you've had a kid going to college, usually they can't wait to leave the square town behind and go away to college. And even if they care about you, it's part of growing up. And then they're calling you every weekend, and they want to come home, and they want you to come out. I had more conversations with my oldest son the first semester in college than I did the entire 2 years preceding his leaving, for which I helped him pack and drove him out just a couple of weeks early. So he could get oriented. And he's calling me up saying, Dad, can you come out and visit? How come? Isolated, alienated, insecure, lonely, homesick. Here's a drug, all that's gone. It's gone for 12 hours when you use it. But of course, extremely dangerous. You cannot trust everybody. You cannot disclose or act intimately with everybody. Even we're seeing in this, again, gender differences right here with this drug and this chemistry. Do males and females perceive the world the same? Absolutely not. You think in terms of intimacy, do men and women perceive, experience, understand intimacy the same way? No, all the women shaking their heads no, all the guys are like this. What? Is this going to be one of those? No, it's not. But there are real differences. You ask women about intimacy, they tell you things like sharing, talking, commitment, passion, romance, love. For men, the list is much shorter. What's number one? Sex. And number two? So we said beer over here. No, it's sex, sports, beer. No, but there are real differences in how we perceive intimacy, and male and female differences, and they're very clearly delineated. Doesn't mean men can't commit, men can't be passionate, doesn't mean men can't fall in love, doesn't mean men can't talk. Usually means we'll talk after, after I wake up. So you have a drug that gets in a brain and changes the dynamic of that brain, but not just changes it in gender-specific ways. You have a very, very popular drug on the college campus, and one that's in 4th place in many of our high schools these days, and it's all based on its impact on this powerful chemical serotonin. We know we have norepinephrine down there, which is just a fancy way of saying adrenaline. So we have any of the stimulants, any of the over-the-counter stimulants. I was just quickly looking at the list from the western states, and stimulants are up there pretty high, 8th and 10th and 12th graders. Over-the-counter stimulants. Ephedra, We talked about earlier, dexatrin, caffeine pills, those things. How come? Pretty powerful impact on the brain's chemistry. We have acetylcholine. This is one, again, that can help. We know that marijuana suppresses acetylcholine. We know that one of the things that kids like about it, again, go back to the ADD kids that have excess amounts of hyperactivity and energy, jumpiness and jitteriness, find, in fact, not just a change in the chemistry of the brain and their ability to screen external distractors, focus on one thing, have a reduction of anxiety, but in fact, a diminishment of motor response. So they feel calmer. Okay. Who sat with an adult at any table at any conference and noticed the table vibrating as their leg relentlessly kicks back and forth? Well, marijuana suppresses that stuff. So for a lot of kids, they feel less jittery, less physically active. It's based on downturn of acetylcholine. What's a drawback? Well, acetylcholine is also, along with a couple of other compounds, is very important for memory storage. So they're not going to be able to learn as well under the influence of that drug and store information. And of course, endorphin, all of the endorphin compounds, again, primarily in the limbic system, have to do with the suppression of physical in the brainstem, social, emotional in the limbic system, suppression of physical, social, or emotional pain. And no drug family, like the opioids, can activate endorphin sites. Endorphin is short. It's a coined term. It's a new word. It's short for endogenous morphine. And if we make an internal morphine, and we do, and the one we make is 54 times stronger than the one they give us in the hospital. So to match 1 milligram of endorphin we promote or produce, the hospital has to give us 54 milligrams in a shot to match our own powerful chemical that suppresses physical, social, and emotional pain. You have drugs that can get in and activate that system. It's not just about the physical pain, it's about the social and emotional pain that makes them incredibly attractive. Heroin is showing up in the top 5 in some high schools and in the top 3 in some colleges. How come? Because it's new, and it's the new wave because it's a new format, smokable heroin, but it's an old treatment for physical, social, or emotional pain. And when we talk about emotional pain, it's not just, again, heroin has remarkable ability to promote euphoria and generate the absence of anxiety, which many people find as a secondary production of euphoria. If you have no worries, no anxieties. Anybody ever have an operation of any kind where first they tell you the interesting story, we're going to put you to sleep. No, they're going to render you totally unconscious, and perhaps you'll come out of that. And then you're signing the thing that if your kidneys fall on the floor of the operating room, it's not their fault. So when I had to have an operation a couple of years ago, because I like research, I researched all of the things that could go wrong for me in the hospital setting. There's over 300. This was at the time that the newspaper reports were coming out of Florida about the operation where they cut the wrong foot off the patient. Oh yeah, I like that. So I go to the hospital filled with anxiety. When I had my markers, so I'd written on myself, I'm not the kidney patient. If you put a circle with a line through it over an organ, it works out for you. So I had to have my wrist operated on. So I was so filled with anxiety, I thought, I didn't sleep all night. I thought, they're going to have to drag me down there with 8 big male nurses to get me in there. They don't. They send one nurse. She has, however, the strength of 8 males because she has a hypodermic syringe with Demerol, an opioid compound, in it, and you get that injection, and not only is all of your anxiety gone, but a profound personality change comes over you. And you become what they want. Now see, I don't have any pain yet, but I have emotional distress, and now it's gone. And you become what they want, which is a wonderfully compliant patient. So I say, will you get in a wheelchair? And you say, of course, I'll get in a wheelchair. And then I'm saying stuff to them like, oh, and thank you for putting those scruffy things on my feet. Right? And they're saying, oh, we put them on everybody. But not like you put them on me. You know, the sense that the world is the most wonderful place. And on the way down, not only am I compliant, I'm generous. So I'm saying to them, what do I have two of that somebody needs one? Take it out of me. Give it to the people who need it. Well, sharing is caring. So you go through that experience, and you don't have any doubt, if you go through that, why people like this drug. And some people who go through that experience say, what I'd like to do is volunteer for all kinds of exploratory surgery. Do you need somebody to practice on? How about those young surgeons? Don't they need practice? Take me. Give me the Demerol. Take me there. And other people will say, that drug was so powerful that I know that if I ever did it on the street or at home, I would be lost forever. And that's all based on, not on like history so much as the amount of neurochemistry in the brain. Where are the receptors? How many are there? How active are they? How much drug gets into them? And some people have way more activity than others. But these drugs are incredibly powerful. And of course, we're seeing heroin down. Hey, we got, in some states, 17% of the high school girls talking about using Percodan, Dilaudid, Tylenol 3 and 4. And where are they getting that stuff? Actually, not from their own homes. What's often a money-making endeavor high school girls can engage in? And prostitution is one that comes up a lot, but it's not the one I'm thinking about. What state are you from? Okay. What do they get? Babysitting. Yeah, okay, yeah. I need to reframe that question. What legal and benign part-time work can high school girls come up with? Yeah, babysitting. So what's a fringe benefit of babysitting? Kids sleep 8:30, parents aren't coming home till 1 o'clock. Oh, you can talk to your boyfriend for a while on the phone, or you can check out that medicine cabinet where people, how far is Canada? How much? 2 hours, a little ride. When I'm in New York State up on the border, I sometimes drive across the Canadian border just to go to the big Rite Aids that they build right off the border crossings. Rite Aid's bigger than this building, where people from the States go across and buy 222s. 222s are codeine, Tylenol, and acetaminophen. And the Americans come in, you don't need a script. You buy them over-the-counter, meaning they don't put them on the shelf, you have to ask the druggist. And they have them in 50s, 100s, 200s, and 400s. And I stand there and watch the Americans. At first you think they were buying condoms in the 50s because they come up to their counter and they say, have you got any 222s? And the nurse says, what's that? Oh, you want 222s? And the druggist turns around and says, are you from the States? And he's reaching for the 400. And the guy says, yes, they get the 400, take out, because that's the one they want. They don't want the 50, they want the 400. So, you know, we're talking about families that have Tylenol 4 from bursitis, raking the leaves up, and they take 4 of them, and they get 14 days worth. Now there's 10 days left. Oh, what are we supposed to do with drugs we don't use? Oh, dump them. But you know, you could get that bursitis back anytime. So people keep those drugs, and when was the last time you counted them? You know, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go count the 10 222s that I left up there, or the Tylenol 4s. So I know we talk with high school girls who routinely steal the opioids from medicine cabinets, routinely steal. They don't steal them all, and they don't take them while they're babysitting. They take them when they need them, or take them for parties. So it's really interesting. And so much of it's out there, and they have access to it. Of course, now, while all that stuff happens, one of the big problems that anybody's going to have is 2 big problems that anybody's going to have taking drugs and maintaining the drug taking, and the biggest one is tolerance. And there's 2 kinds of tolerance. One is liver tolerance, and 2 is cellular tolerance. Liver tolerance means this, that your liver sees the drug as such a powerful entity that it produces those enzymes in different places in the liver all the time, and it has a small amount ready to go, and when you take a drug, it picks up the drug in the bloodstream, goes through the liver sends out, metabolizes some of it inside and sends out group of drugs to follow it through the bloodstream and metabolize it at sites in the brain. Now, some drugs, like heroin, for example, are perceived by the liver as so big that it sends out way more enzymes than are necessary. So what happens? You take the drug, it sends them out, but because it's a new drug, it takes a while for the heroin to get metabolized. It might be a 6-hour high. The next time you take heroin, however, 2 or 3 of these are left over from the first time. So the liver makes 5 more, but you already got 2 actively degrading the drug, and then these 5 come over. Now you have 3 left this time. Next time you take the drug, the liver sends out 5, 3 are already on the job. So in a short period of time, in order to get the same effect from that drug that I got in my initial taking, what do I have to do? More drug to get the same effect. So what happens? I take more drug, my liver says, well, you think I can't count? My liver sends out more and more enzymes, and we have this interesting phenomena that people increase the dose regularly. Now, very often, at some point, things kind of stabilize. That's why cigarette smokers generally get up to 2.5 packs a day and don't need more than that, but they got to get up there. Most cigarette smokers will start out, and they have the story, just like every drug user has. I'm only going to do this once in a while. I'll only smoke after dinner, da-da-da-da-da-da, but you don't get the same reward. So you increase the dose and then the frequency. Now, in the brain, what we talked about at reward sites, that cellular tolerance, and so you're going to have not only more liver enzymes breaking the drug down and not even letting it get up to your brain, but as you bombard dopamine receptors, remember what we talked about, those dopamine receptors over time will actually degrade, so you will not get the reward from the drug. 2 things working to diminish reward, that means you have to increase the dose. Increase the dose, increase the dose. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that we have a mechanism called rebound, and that rebound mechanism is another problem for people to deal with, and that looks like this. If I take a drug to suppress social, emotional, and physical pain, any heroin type drug or Demerol will do it because I have pain chemistry. We call that chemistry substance P. Because I have pain chemistry, say from an injury or a serious emotional problem, I have a loved one die. I have substance P release for that. I take the heroin, it pushes that down, it gives me relief from the pain, but when the drug is over, all the substance P chemistry I've been suppressing, do I come back to where I was? Nope, now I get up here where there's a higher intensity of the physical, social, and emotional pain. All I could do is go to a hospital and watch this. For some reason, many hospitals still believe that everybody metabolizes morphine at exactly the same moment. So it doesn't matter how big, small, tall, old, gender you are, we're going to give you morphine every 4 hours. If you metabolize it more faster than that, well, you're in trouble. If you metabolize it more slowly than that, then you'll be stoned for the afternoon visit from your relatives because you still have plenty in you when we give you the next dose. Many hospitals have gone to patient-controlled analgesia, where the patients decide when to take it, and what did we learn from that? Everybody said, oh, you let patients control, instead of the knowledgeable medical staff, you let patients control the drugs they'll take, what will they do? Go overboard. What do we find out in all the studies on PCA? They use 1/3 less than the control group that's the nursing staff. 1/3 less morphine if you let me do it. It's because I don't have to wait. If I'm a fast metabolizer, at 3 hours I'm in extreme pain, the pain builds. Any emotion around pain? Anybody have any feelings on, say, a visit to the dentist? All those feelings, God, I haven't seen my dentist in so long. It would be so much fun to chat. What do we have? We have emotions about anxiety around potential pain. So if you have an injury and you're in the hospital and the drug is clearing and you're getting the pain back, is it only physical, your response? No, it's emotional. And in fact, all the research on what we used to call addictive personality was based on studying people after their addictions and often during withdrawal, where we said they were egocentric, they were manipulative, they were deceptive, they were weak, they were this, they were this, they were this. Go to the hospital. Watch your Aunt Rose, who came in with a broken hip and was given morphine after they put the pins in. And watch when the hospital says, if she's a fast metabolizer, at 3 hours, and she says, nurse, I need more of that medicine. Oh, well, honey, it's going to be another hour. Well, I need it now. Well, but doctor said, so we'll say, no, where does the doctor live? And you're there saying, gee, Aunt Rose, chill out. She's saying, you keep quiet. And you're saying, what happened to lovely, wonderful Aunt Rose? Well, nothing, except now she has, by actual measurement, a bombardment of substance P at higher levels than she had when she broke the hip. So we can say, oh, well, she's not a strong person, she has an addictive personality, she can't regulate and control herself, she's trying to manipulate me. We say all that stuff, and we do. But the truth is, she needs the drug now, because the drug we gave her to help her with pain management is now increasing the bombardment of pain chemistry, and we need to treat that until the pain signals coming out of the traumatized bone structure diminish as the bone heals. Then you diminish the drug. And the patients on PCA do that. They do that by themselves. They use a good amount of morphine at the beginning. By the time 2 weeks is up, they're down to tiny amounts. How come? Not getting the pain signal anymore. So what happens in rebound, we get the relief from the drug, whether it's emotional, social, or physical, and then it all comes back bigger. So that's why people increase their frequency, because rebound happens fast. I need more drug. I need the drug again, and they increase their dose because of tolerance. So you get these things going on to the point that when you have a powerful drug like heroin, then you see some interesting dynamics. And the dynamics will show us things like how people will, of course, as always, deceive themselves, but it starts out not as deception. So we're looking at heroin here. You look at that spoon down the bottom. Let me move it up here. Look at that spoon down the bottom. Here's a real difference with heroin in the 90s. When I was working on the streets of New York City in the 80s, we would buy heroin and have it analyzed. Best heroin we come up was 21%. The average 16, 17%. That's a 72% street sample. Street sample. 5 cartels competing for the heroin dollar. Unbelievable amounts of purity in heroin, primarily based on the competition and also their understanding that people are afraid of injecting because of AIDS, hepatitis, and other things. So if you're not going to inject heroin, what would you do with it? Smoke it or snort it, but if you're smoking 20% heroin, the smoking itself degrades it down to below what we call the threshold point, so you don't get much out of it. If you're going to sell smokable heroin and make it viable, make people get high from it, what are you going to have to do? Boost it up. So then you sell 40%, and of course the guy from the Russian the Russian underground, for example, in Sheepshead Bay down in Brooklyn where I work sometimes, he's selling 45%. Now we have the Colombian connection, a Colombian heroin connection, they're selling 48%. So we get China White, we have this, we have that, we have all these new heroins that are unbelievable. So people buy the new heroin, use the new heroin, smoke that new heroin, snort that new heroin, and because when we talk about prevention, and we talk about developing prevention models, again, we're grown-ups, we're often developing the prevention models for other grown-ups, or at least from a grown-up perspective, and what do we find out? That some of our models don't work with kids at all. So we do a harm reduction model. So and here's a good harm reduction model. If I'm working with heroin users, and they're saying they're going to use no matter what, then what am I going to try to do? Reduce the harm. How might I do that? Needle exchange, teaching about bleach, da-da-da-da-da-da. Take that message to the high school, what happens? Entirely different perception. We will talk about, you can't inject, you get AIDS, it's a fatal disease, a tiny, tiny microscopic droplet of blood in the barrel of that needle can stay viable for days, and if you share that needle with somebody, now you have that, and you'll be dead from that. And the difference between adults and kids is in what we'll talk about later. One difference is in perception. If I give that message so strongly to kids, what becomes their perception of the danger of heroin use? It's only a danger when you shoot it. And so I'll talk with kids, 14-year-olds in affluent high schools who are saying, I wouldn't shoot it. I just smoke it because it's not dangerous. And I say, okay, see, here's why we think heroin is dangerous. It's the most addictive drug we know about. And I said, but I would never shoot it. because that's what their perception of the danger is. So they smoke it and snort it, but of course what happens? Tolerance happens. And because of tolerance, we know that with tolerance they're going to have a need to increase the dose, increase the dose, increase the dose. And if you're getting 50, 60% heroin and smoking that up, or snorting it, because you can't get it across tissue as well, because the smoking act degrades this down to 30, then at some point you're going to say, I'm spending $300 a day in getting a significant loss of the heroin that I need to get into my system. Is there a better way to do this? And what's the better way? Dissolve it in water, draw it up into this syringe, and inject it into your veins. You know, here's a picture. Now, some of you have been in training with me before have seen this one, but this is from Seattle, Washington. An article in Rolling Stone where they spent a month in Seattle investigating, looking at, and the title of the article was Dope Town. Seattle, Washington. The music scene in Seattle has a ton of heroin involved in it. This is a picture of a young 21-year-old woman taken outside a music club who a year ago had been in college and now started off smoking heroin and now is a year into this, would never inject, because that's how you get AIDS, would never do that. But when we talk about kids who the tolerance needs override their fear of consequences. And you're talking about this young woman right here who's sitting in her car, and she's in her car because she needs the rearview mirror because she's done damage to veins in her arms and is now injecting right here into the carotid vein. So she's injecting to the carotid vein. She's going to get the heroin down to that heart and boost it up to that brain in 10, 15 seconds. Along with any viral element that's in there, any bacteria. She's been shooting 60%. If she gets an 8% hit, she's dead. You have this unbelievable set of risks for her, but her need for more and more of the drug has brought her to a more efficient way to get her dollar's worth out of that heroin. And all those consequences that she used to be afraid of, number one, don't look so bad as the withdrawal she'll have to go through if she tries to quit, and the active part of her life that can consider those consequences is readily suppressed as soon as that drug gets in there. So she has a brain that can say, oh God, I'm afraid of AIDS. As soon as that drug gets in there, that's gone. It's gone. I used to train, when the health services wanted contact tracing for HIV positivity, if you were seropositive, the health systems, if you gave partner notification, then we go and find people who you shot drugs with or you were having sex with. And I had to train the health people to go back. I had to train them first to discriminate in terms of intoxication, particularly heroin intoxication, pinpoint pupils, this kind of stuff. Because they would go to somebody who was stoned on heroin and knock on the door and say, listen, we have some bad information, I want to talk about sad information, scary stuff I want to talk to you about. Somebody you've been doing drugs with is positive. People were like, yeah, okay, man, and go out. And they would say, I did that. Hey, listen, you could light them on fire when they come to the door. They would be saying, and then say, you're on fire. They'd say, yeah, okay, man, that's cool. Because they are unable, with a drug that suppresses the brain's ability to understand physical, social, and emotional pain, to internalize the information that you have given them that they're at high risk and ought to go get tested. So we would say, if any of these signs are there, you write down, intoxicated, come back. If you don't come back, you didn't do the partner notification. You didn't do the contact tracing, because here's a drug that prevents the brain from internalizing that information. So you have this powerful set of chemicals in the brain, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, endorphin, and they're only that's a list of 5 out of 100 known neurotransmitters that we know most drugs impact upon and have a fundamental change in the mechanism by which we metabolize them, clear them, and regulate them. Any questions about those dynamics, those mechanisms, those mechanics? Anybody got a question, comment, experience to share or work with clients or anything? Is anybody seeing heroin, smokable or snortable heroin, down at the college level, into the college level, or talked about at the high school, or yeah? Okay, where are you? Okay, out of Spokane. Absolutely, we're seeing it down in 9th grade in some schools. And it's not, we still struggle with a fundamental perception that drugs like crack cocaine and heroin are inner city, black young people drugs.
But if you snort it, if you smoke it, you know, that's cool.
Yes, yeah.
You know, we don't do ghetto drugs, we don't do
Right.
crack.
Right, right.
You know,
It's down.
but we'll do methamphetamine.
Yes.
We won't do crack.
We want to crack. And we'll smoke heroin, we'll smoke heroin, because we're not injecting it. And the other reason, when I talk to kids, it couldn't be clearer that their perception that their class and color will somehow prevent this dynamic of addiction from happening to them. So I've been on Ivy League campuses where sophomores on college tell me, oh, well, you know, basically they're saying to me, I'm a rich white kid, how can I get addicted? See, because your brain is the same as anybody's brain. And if this drug gets in, it changes it. But not only do the kids have that perception, that's still the perception in America. So I like TV shows, but I get distressed sometimes when I watch ER, which is a great television show, but I have never yet on ER seen a crack whore who is not a young African-American woman. Never yet on that show. Bring me in somebody from the suburbs of Chicago where the addiction to cocaine and methamphetamine is running at the same levels. And show us that. How are we going to design treatment for people on the college campus when our belief system is that it's just a ghetto drug and we've given up on it? So now, how are we going to design treatment? We don't believe they're taking it. We don't understand that they're taking it. Our treatment programs are designed entirely for a population that still does heroin, but new people are in it. What are we going to do? I have kids at colleges saying to me, I'm doing $600 a day, I'm stealing from my dorm mates, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I need help. And so I say, okay, go down to the methadone maintenance clinic. They go once. I see them again, they say, what are you trying to do to me? You know, because it's down in the inner city, they're afraid, it's not at all in their culture, they have all these stereotypes they're afraid of, they're not going back. Okay, what am I doing? Send them to Phoenix House? Oh yeah, give up your junior year at Harvard and go into Phoenix House for 18 months. They look at me like I need to see the psychiatrist. They won't go to college counseling, you don't trust them. Don't trust the college counseling people, particularly if they're dealing, to get their smokable heroin. Don't trust the college counseling people. They won't go to outside counseling on their parents' third-party reimbursement because that'll show up as a spend. So, and they're asking me a question and I don't have the answer. They say, what kind of treatment do you have for me? And I say, we don't have it. We have prevention though. You should have never started this. So you have this real interesting problem here. And with kids, what we know about that problem with kids is that we're seeing some real differences in adolescence because of their brain chemistry, their life, their belief systems, their magical thinking, this will never happen to me, and their now greater access to drugs all over. So before I move off this let's look at the difference between kids and adults. Anybody have a comment, question? The drugs, the brain, the dynamics that I could clarify before we move on to that. Yes?
Well, you know, we're hearing about this thing out of Seattle, in some places, the sheet method of doing the heroin.
Yeah.
That whole culture, where's that coming from? Why, how does that get developed?
You know,
How does heroin become sheet?
I don't know. I'd love to be able to tell you, it's not the money, because a lot of the musicians who are doing heroin are couch surfing. They stay at a friend's couch for 4 nights, and they go to another couch, another apartment. So they don't have money. They're trying to make it in the music business. A lot of it, they are affluent, young white people who've had everything handed to them and believe they need to suffer somehow existentially in order to drive the music forward. Well, what's a better way to do that than getting addicted to heroin? We have the models. I mean, if any of you can remember, even President Clinton saying on national television how distressing it is to see the models with their anorectic look, with the dark circles under their eyes, with their always love their things up over the injection sites. If there's even no real injection sites, they're doing it to mimic the heroin waves on campus. I know that it's a bunch of factors, biological, psychological, social. But I'll tell you, you look at the music that kids have today in their homes on their CDs, a ton of music is filled with references to drugs. Not just drugs. There's some stuff. Wu-Tang Clan has one. I got a bag full of skunk, I got a fistful of blunts, I'm about to go get lifted. Okay, that's pretty straightforward, but there's plenty of heroin references, there's plenty of methamphetamine. Third Eye Blind, I had a song that hit the top 10, Semi Charm Like, methamphetamine. It's about methamphetamine. So, there's a ton of it. There's a subculture in the youth population about drugs that's so extensive, and that by and large we don't know about, that it's kind of scary. There are top 10 college hits that you never heard about. Thin Lizard Dawn. A lot of you probably have those CDs. Thin Lizard Dawn has a top 10 college hit called Weed. Okay. Anybody ever hear it? No. Millions of college kids have. There are baseball caps that say 420 on them, What's that about? People say, what biblical reference do you think that is? Oh, that's a botanical reference, not a biblical reference, That's a college time signature for getting stoned. Undergraduate classes end at 4 o'clock, go back to your dorm, takes 5 minutes for your crew to come over, another 5 minutes to get the blunts rolled up, put the towel under the door, open the window, get the patchouli out, play the music, play some, whatever. You want to play the Black Crowes, play Hempilation, and get stoned. What time are you stoned? 4:20. I see bumper stickers. I'll tell you, I rarely disclose personally. We have a young child at home. Our babysitter comes up one day, and my car's blocking the driveway, which I don't usually do. Her dad drives her up. She's a high school senior, but because I have the car, he has to back around, which he doesn't usually have to do. On the bumper of his car, it's 4:20. And so when my babysitter, Hope, comes in, we have a little talk. And then I call her dad, because he works for the town. And he parks his car at the town garage right by the road. And I'm thinking, gee, Mike, maybe you don't want everybody driving through town saying, well, Mike Housley's stoned at work again. So that he has no idea what this is. They have stickers, clothes, jewelry, music, records, internet access. A parent sent me a package of her 8th grade son's internet chats that she printed off there that were totally about drugs. The reason she sent it to me is because I was coming to the community to speak, as she had organized, because she's the head of the Drug Abuse Prevention Council in that community. And she said to me, I don't know, we told him drugs were bad. He said, oh, I know, Mom. And so, okay, that's over. Whew, we did that. And embedded in that information they gave me, the kids have a code names. There's a federal government agency that can send you the street terms of drugs. Parents would never know. They talk about Cocoa Puffs, Special K, Northern Lights. So what do parents think? Oh, they're watching the Aurora Borealis, and then having breakfast together the next morning. This whole extensive network of information about drugs that are out there. You can get it. The kids who don't get told about it by their friends can call the High Times 1-900 number. I call that number. Now, I'll tell you why I call that number. They have anti-quotation market tips. Now, if I'm going to Minneapolis, I call up. I say, you have to do cities. You have to write in, push the state, then push the 4 initials of the city. It comes on. You can get. How do I know Tokyo Sense me is in Seattle? I call the number. They tell me Tokyo Sense, 750 an ounce. They tell me the hallucinogens there. They tell me the mushroom crop. They tell me what I want to know if I'm a traveling dopehead. Cultivation tips, drug testing tips, social and political action, legal aid, all on this 1-900 number. Where is it? It's available for any kid to call. You get on, High Times, by the way, has a website. You get on that and get legal information. You get a chat room, you get information from other kids. And there's just a ton of this stuff available to kids. What do we do with our rolling blunt thing here? No, I know you didn't. I'm just asking for help, Margaret. That's not an accusation. I had a thing on rolling blunts. It's a cigar wrapper. Now the kids, so you can buy blunts, which is really good, but in Dutch Master blunts, but they're $3.50 a blunt. Then you have to throw the cigar tobacco out, put the marijuana in, roll it up, and smoke it. So you're wasting premium cigar tobacco. Or you can get a new product, which I'll find for you later. It's a cigar leaf to make your own blunts. It's only $1. Okay. Now, oh wait, how can we sell those in America? Why not? Is it illegal to sell cigar leaf wrappers? No. Oh, there's a warning on the back. Underage sale prohibited. I'm so glad they have that there, because otherwise they might sell it to kids. So this is America. They have a ton of information. Here's a list of from the drug testing information. Here's 12 products you can get that will give you test pure guarantee from your things. There's THC pure, there's amber 13, there's clear, there's my favorite name for the testing products, urine luck. Which is my favorite. What would your mom say if you had that up in the bedroom? What's urine luck? You have all these products that kids can get. They work. We always say they don't work. Of course they work. That's why they keep buying them. So you have this whole underground here, and you have this tremendous amount of information available for kids. And man, not only are the drugs out there, but as far as we can tell, their responses as to why they use drugs are pretty enlightening. So if you take a look at that list in there that says adolescents' reasons for drug use, these are reasons not that parents give or law enforcement or chemical dependency people, not that adults give, these are reasons that kids give. And you take a look at this and you go down that list, and I'll tell you, we're not going to have time enough today to run every drug against that list, but boy, we can take a look at some of them. And I think a powerful reason that we talked about earlier is that need for inclusion. So you have this powerful need for inclusion, this powerful internally driven emotion, and one of the things we talk about so much is not peer pressure, but peer presence. See, when we talk tomorrow about some relapse prevention stuff, we're going to say that being in the presence of peers is incredibly high risk for relapse. But for kids who don't do drugs or who are thinking about it or considering it or have used a little bit, their risk is unbelievable also. If they're with peers using, their internal need for belonging escalates dramatically. Now, but what's the age at which that stops? It does stop.
Is it gender related?
Not too much. Not too much. The girls would give the same reason, but the age might be a little different. Yeah. Well, in general, what do we find in general? Beyond the self-esteem thing, what do we find in general? Who matures earlier physically, males or females? Girls or boys? Girls. Who matures earlier emotionally, girls or boys? Girls. Who matures earlier socially, girls or boys? Girls. See the trend here? Who's afraid to answer questions about gender when you do a training session? Men or women? Men, because none of them have said a word so far. So we have earlier maturation physically, emotionally, and socially with girls. So there may be an earlier age at which the need for inclusion diminishes. We don't have any studies on that part of it yet. Females will mature out at younger times than males, 18, 19, 20, 21. For males, what's the what's the maturity date? 50? No, never. Research indicates 82 to 84 years of age. Unfortunately, most of them are dead by then. No, it's anywhere from 24 to 28. And now, remember, not all men, not all the time. You may have selected one out for your marriage. It's going to push the envelope a little further. In defense of men, I would like to say this, that because we have to bear the burden of adolescent emotional intensity over a longer period of time, we reserve the right to regress to adolescent behavior at any time in the life cycle. Hey, you gotta get quick, take some, get some. What do we have here? We have, now listen, here's an important thing. Later on, I'm going to talk about the intensity of emotions in the adolescent brain, and I'm going to talk about at least a doubling of emotional intensity in the adolescent brain. So it's critical to understand that when they tell us this stuff, it's not just a factual reporting, but there are in fact some intensity levels embedded in the information. It's because their need to belong is way stronger than our need to belong, not only based on neurochemical events, but on developmental events. What's going on in the life of a teenager? Develop their own identity. Oh, that's pretty scary. Not the identity we want for them. So there's a rejection of parental values to some degree, a development of their own identity. Who is it they need to help them with that? Their peers. A separation from the family. Oh, I want to go. Oh, you used to go see grandma one Saturday every month. Now they don't want to go. Oh, okay, they'll go if, will you leave Timmy home? No, that's your 7-year-old brother. Yeah, we'll put him out in the backyard with the dog, Janine, for the afternoon. He'll be fine. So they start to separate out the family. Don't want to go with everybody. Don't want to go to church. Values, all that stuff. And the mall rules. Who's taking teenagers to the mall? To have a big mall, what are the mall rules for your behavior when you're with your teenager at the mall? Yeah, there's a 50-foot free zone. You may not come into the free zone. You may not make eye contact into that free zone. You must never call their name out loud in the mall. You may never show in any way, shape, or form that you are remotely related to them in the mall. What are you good for? And transportation. And even transportation and money has issues. You can either trail them behind and pay for things that they leave at the counter with your credit card. They leave them there. If they go out, you pay. Or you can give them money on the parking lot. The ride itself, you should come up towards the entrance to the mall, but not stop. Slow down. So they can roll out of the car along the ground and then stand up as though they have no connection with your vehicle. That's amazing. So what happens? All of that scary stuff.
You're scared.
A guy named Anthony Fox has a great book to read about adolescent emotional intensity. It's called I Hate You, Will You Drive Me and Cheryl to the Mall? And it's a very, very interesting book about the neurochemically based intensity of adolescent emotion. But so they're separating from the family, developing their own identity, need their peer group for that, and have twice the emotional intensity for those needs than we have. See, so when we say, you don't need to do what the peer group's doing, honey, they're like, what is wrong with you? Of course they need to do what the peer group does, at a much higher level than we have to. I hope this makes sense to you. I hope you find it informative. I hope you think the way I presented it is effective. But frankly, see, I hope about all that stuff, but I don't need that stuff. I don't need you people. I don't. I like you people, but I don't need you like a 15-year-old needs their peers. I have a life. I have accomplishments. I'm happy with myself. I would like to have a good relationship with you, but I don't need it. I'm getting on that plane, we take off, I forget about you people. If you don't like what I'm doing here, I put that down to your lack of good judgment. That's why. I'm a grown-up. People mean... I don't need you, Neil. But I'd like to be friends. We're grown-ups. We like the respect and the interaction with our peers, but we have families, we have lives, we have accomplishments, we know ourselves. We don't need it at the level that a 15-year-old needs it. And see, it's crucial to understand that. So when they're in the presence of peers doing drugs, bang, the risk goes up. Can't help it. Not only does the risk go up for belonging, what if they have a set of negative emotions? So they have all this negative emotional stuff going on here. If they have emotional competency that they've learned through the role models at home, through the teaching of their parents, like most of your clients have, of course, then they might know how to do this. But of course, many of your kids have no idea how to, even to identify their emotions, to articulate those emotions, to have an action plan to manage, cope, or endure those negative emotions. No idea at all. We don't teach it in school. We don't teach it at home. We expect somehow they'll learn it through some kind of, I don't know, psychic channeling. Okay? But it doesn't happen. But what does happen? Oh, look at the drugs we talked about. Look, marijuana. Too much anxiety as a teenager, boom, take care of it. It's gone. Look at cigarette smoking. Self-esteem, female cigarette smoking, here it is. Okay. Too much emotional pain. You got the pills, the tranquilizers, the Xanax, the sleepers. You got all those drugs out there that can get in and absolutely transform a negative emotion away. Feel isolated, lonely, homesick, here's ecstasy. And you got a problem, we have a drug for it. And in fact, when you watch what happens with these drugs, it's not astonishing, it makes sense for kids. Now, does every kid who uses drugs have an emotional problem? No, but the ones who have it, we know they're having it at high level intensity, twice as much emotional intensity. You look at anxiety in the life of a kid. I talked about this the other day, but the more I spend in this field, the more anxious I am about my own kids. And in a lot of ways, 1999 is not like 1959 or 1979. It is not like that. And we have this persistent belief that the awful things that happen someplace else. Well, I mentioned earlier, second leading cause of death in the United States for young people under the age of 19 is what? Death by gunshot wound. So, I can translate that. I live in Long Lake, New York. What could possibly happen there? Oh, well, where have all the recent kids killing kids with weapons in the schools taken place? Chicago, was it? Detroit, was it? LA, was it? Where was it? How about rural Oregon? How about Jonesboro, Arkansas? How about Paducah, Kentucky? How about suburbs or rural towns where kids have access to guns just like they have anywhere else? Where kids have guns in the homes, guns in the community, where kids have planning. They just arrested 5 kids out west. Just arrested 5 kids who had, through the internet, gotten together, had plans, all went to the same school. 5 high school kids who had a plan to kill their principal, their assistant principal, 4 teachers, and 20 students. And already had the guns, the weapons, the plan, and were ready to carry the plan out 2 days from when one of them broke, told his parents called the cops and arrested them. Now, if he didn't break, there'd be more dead kids. So if I'm a kid in 1999, that's a reality that I didn't have to face growing up. Now, I mentioned this the other day, but I was trying to think of what was I afraid of as a kid. And all I can remember being afraid of was the Russians were going to bomb us with intercontinental ballistic missiles. Anybody remember that? See, but my teachers convinced me that we could be killed at any time. But they also convinced me of a way that we could reduce that anxiety. And what was that way? The air raid drill went off. We got under our desk. And I was in elementary school. I was maybe in 6th grade. I completely trusted my teachers. I believed that. I get under that desk. I had absolute faith that if a 50-megaton nuclear device went off in the parking lot of our school and vaporized everything for 8 miles around, my desk would protect me. Isn't that a wonderful illusion? Who can remember this? The kid on the window side. Each aisle, each row, the kid on the window side, the ones on that side, each had, as they were saying, what do they have to do? Shut the blind. Yeah. Yeah, see, that will prevent some glass from coming into our classroom. And I can remember being like, one kid was absent that day, we had an air drill, and everybody's like, oh, nobody's shutting Michael's blind. Glass could come into our classroom. What classroom? There's not going to be a classroom. There's not going to be a building. But I was afraid of it. We had anxiety relief. Anxiety. What do kids do now? What do they do now for anxiety relief? Here, I'll tell you an example. I'm out of middle school a month ago. There's a fire drill. They all go out. There's a big commotion because I'm curious. I go back in. I'm kind of lackadaisical about the fire drills anyway. I'm not on staff. I'm not a big group drill. So I'm wandering around. I can hear crying and screaming. inside the girls' restroom. There's a 5th grade girl who's locked herself in the stall and is sobbing hysterically, and the teachers are yelling at her, "Come out of there, Amanda! You have to get out of the building. It's a fire drill." And she's no, see, she's facing an anxiety that none of us in here in the 5th grade ever have to face, and I hope my daughter doesn't, but might. And that is that her parents have said to her, because they've seen and had etched in their brains the pictures of 4 little girls, 12 years of age, being put on those hospital gurneys and wheeled away dead in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And what was the mechanism of that death? That the 2 boys set up the guns, one of them ran in, pulled a fire drill. When those kids ran out, they shot and killed 4 kids, injured 12 others, killed a teacher, and parents across the country are telling the kids, if there's a fire drill, don't you dare go out of that building. You hide in the girls' room. You don't let anybody take you out. Now you be a 5th grader and tell me if you have any anxiety when that happens, and you dread the fire drill going off because you're going to have a conflict with the staff who needs to get you out of the building, and your parents have told you, don't you go out. And the 5 kids who were going to kill their teacher, principal, assistant principal, 4 teachers and 20 kids had already on the net set up their strategy, which was to pull a fire drill and see, you set up by the administration building because the principals come out over here. So they had 3 kids by the administration building and 2 kids where the teachers were coming out of the math wing to kill those teachers. And then they were going to try to shoot individual kids. Now, see, this is a different place. And if you're a kid, you know about it. It's all on TV. You see it over and over again. It's a different place. Do they have anxiety? Yeah. Is it real? Absolutely. Anybody read the latest thing in the Journal of the American Medical Association on sexually transmitted diseases and how often sexually active teenagers should be tested? Just out. Anybody read that? How often